No, our movement seeks to avoid violence.
But your own words call for direct confrontation.
That's right. We demand confrontation.
Isn't that a demand for violence?
Well, you and I are now in confrontation, but I see no violence.
But nowhere in these documents do you say that the white government is doing anything good.
Well, it does so little good, my lord, that it is not worth commenting on.
But surely that approach inflames racial hatred and anti-whiteism.
My lord, blacks are not unaware of the hardships they endure, or what the government is doing to them. We want them to stop accepting these hardships.
If you really think about it, white people are such deflectors. You guys literally tried to put the stigma and the notation on us that we're the aggressors, we're just violent, and I don't know, like we're just ready to kill everything we see when it was y'all.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. In case you're new here, my name is Maren
and I'm Maureen. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how Black Americans have often been portrayed as bad people in the media, and we as Africans, not only Africans but all immigrants in America, be it Africans, be it Caribbeans, or anybody in the world who have migrated to America, have been told to stay away from Black Americans because of this very same reason. But when it comes to cognitive dissonance with regards to the white community, they're not really ready to listen to or have a positive conversation about not only slavery but the effects of slavery.
Right, we're also going to be listening to the black folks who are going to be talking about some truth bombs when it comes to the white culture, right? And the main question we are asking is if white people are able to embrace the white culture to do with the development they brought to the colonized countries, and if they're able to talk about the part of white culture where they believe they made other people live in modern worlds, why are they also not able to embrace the part of white culture that brought about a lot of suffering to the human population? Anyway guys, let's listen to what we prepared for you and then we come back and talk about it. You can let us know your thoughts and opinion in the comment section. Also consider subscribing if it's your first time here. Let's watch and then we come back and talk about it.
No, our movement seeks to avoid violence.
But your own words call for direct confrontation.
That's right. We demand confrontation.
Isn't that a demand for violence?
Well, you and I are now in confrontation, but I see no violence.
But nowhere in these documents do you say that the white government is doing anything good.
Well, it does so little good, my lord, that it is not worth commenting on.
But surely that approach inflames racial hatred and anti-whiteism.
My lord, blacks are not unaware of the hardships they endure, or what the government is doing to them. We want them to stop accepting these hardships, to confront them. People must not just give in to the hardships of life. They must find a way, even in this environment, to develop hope for themselves, hope for this country. Now, I think that is what black consciousness is all about. Now, without any reference to the white man, to try and build up a sense of our own humanity, our legitimate place in the world.
But why do you use a phrase like black is beautiful?
Because black is commonly associated with negatives, the black market, the black sheep of the family, anything which is supposed to be bad.
Then why do you use the word? Why call yourselves black? I mean, you people are more brown than black.
Why do you call yourselves white? You people are more pink than white.
Precisely.
you really think about it, white people are such deflectors. You guys literally tried to put the stigma and the notation on us that we're the aggressors, we're just violent, and I don't know, like we're just ready to kill everything we see, when it was y'all. Only in your history are you guys the savages. None in our history does it say that we created or started genocides, or we removed cultures from their country and took them to a whole different nation against their will. Enslaved. I don't think black people was killing others because they were Jews. I don't think black people removed Native Americans from their land. I don't know. This is just history that I'm talking about. It's just like, please live comfortably in y'all skin, which y'all already do. But please just stop trying to put that persona on us, that we're just these negative people that's just ready to be violent, when it's really you guys. In every era, in every generation, you guys choose violence. It doesn't matter. In every scenario.
Finally, somebody is saying it the way it should be. Watch this clip, guys.
White culture is formed in savagery. I also said there isn't a place on God's green earth that they haven't come there and decimated the native inhabitants. There isn't a place. They are murderous savages. That's their culture. They call it conquest. We call it savagery. This is broad history. This is the history of white cultures. When they have the intention to invent a weapon, they don't just invent a weapon that can harm an enemy in one-to-one combat. No. They invent bombs that can decimate entire populations. They invent viruses, like smallpox, that they spread amongst unvaccinated Native Americans and then decimate their populations. And therefore the Americas, have got a native population which is less than the settler population in certain countries like Argentina. I mean, even a country like Brazil, yes, obviously there are still some native inhabitants there, but their population is less than those who were brought in from Africa as slaves, as well as those who came in as European settlers in the colonial times. So the culture of white people throughout white history, even to this very date, is that of savagery. It's that of inhumane behavior that is normalized to the point where they feel like they're entitled to behave like that.
Are there any good white people in the world? There may be, but it doesn't matter. And you know why? No matter how good an individual white person may be, they have an obligation to look out for the best interests of the white race. Therefore, no matter how well-meaning they may be, at the end of the day, they're going to close ranks with their own people. Every white person has an obligation to promote and protect white privilege. If there were so many good white people in the world and so many black multiculturalists claim, why is apartheid still in effect? If you got all these good white people, we should see some structural evidence of their good deeds. Show me the good deeds of those good demons, and I'll change my mind.
Listen, black brother. Before you call anyone a demon, ask yourself, who taught you to hate? Who benefits when we fight each other instead of them? This isn't black versus white. It's truth versus lies. The slavery narrative they fed you is psychological warfare. It keeps you trapped in a victim mindset, outsourcing your power to past grievances, while preventing you from taking control of your present. The reason I highlight these historical distortions isn't to claim victimhood, but to honor my white forefathers who endured slavery in the most atrocious ways. And more importantly, to acknowledge that those same white forefathers fought and died to free your people from bondage. Yet, you're taught to hate their descendants instead. Let me remind you that you benefit daily from white European foundations, the scientific method, Technological advances and concepts of human rights emerged through centuries of exchange and development. While colonization had complex impacts, it often brought an end to practices like cannibalism and ritual sacrifices. In many regions, infrastructures like hospitals and schools elevated societies from practices we would find horrifying today.
I made a statement that was probably really triggering to woke white people all across America. I said that woke white people are some of the most dangerous, insidious individuals that smart, opinionated women of color can face in today's society. And I gave examples from attending a PWI that practically bred this type of individual. I went to a predominantly white liberal arts women's college in suburban Pennsylvania. And yeah, I listed these examples where woke white people at my school bullied me, discriminated against me, humbled and humiliated me, and just dragged me through the mud under the guise of them trying to be like the greater good for humanity and trying to call out my horrible problematic behavior and like save the world. And Nia had an issue with the fact that I didn't give the specific context, but I think that if you and I both put in our thinking caps, you would realize that it was the exact situation I described in the previous video, where the issue that these white people had with me was just like a completely made up reason that was not backed by any substantive fact at all, and they just kind of needed something to latch onto so that they could dig their woke white claws into me and like be super antagonistic towards me and have a reason to be racist and misogynistic towards me. Okay, like that was kind of the point. But if you really want to know the reason, I'm happy to share with you because it proves my point more. The fact that everything that they had issues with me for were completely negligible, arbitrary, and irrelevant. Okay, so first, freshman year of college, when this woke white person in my like freshman writing seminar made a speech about how horrible and problematic and tone deaf I was, and then named me, and then proceeded to like ask me really aggressive, belligerent leading questions about how I was a horrible person, and made me cry for approximately 20 minutes until, you know, I ran out of the room still crying. And then my white professor did nothing but send a half-assed apology email the next day saying that she should have handled the situation, but did not. So what happened was we had read this article about the American college education system, and it had come up the question of like paying for college, and I expressed that my parents had a difficult time paying for me and my brother's college education despite our middle class status, and that I felt disheartened that there was no way we could receive any structural support. And then after that, she made her speech about the fact that I was extremely classist, how I had no respect for poor people, how I treated them like a hypothetical concept, and how I was extremely tone deaf and privileged and unaware of my privilege. Okay, I'm really aware of my privilege, and nowhere did I ever discount the experiences of poor people. But anyways, so that was that. And then Nia, because I really want to invite you and also the rest of our audiences to put on our thinking caps and ponder for a moment that if this woke white person actually wanted to have a productive conversation with me about the issues of class and the way that it affects our education system, do you think that the best method she could have chosen was to make a speech publicly shaming me about it? Or do you think that if she wanted to have a productive conversation, she would have come up to me in a one-on-one setting in a very polite, open-minded way, and then I could have heard more about her views, she could have heard more about my views, and then we would have walked away both with a greater understanding of the topic? Do you think that would have been a better method, or do you think the public humiliation method was the way to go? And do you think she actually cared about the issue she was preaching about, or do you think that she just wanted me to feel humiliated? What do you think? Second example was on my mock trial team. So I was part of the exec board. There were these white exec board members who, after one competition, they decided they had a huge issue with me, and then they made a speech as well publicly in front of all my teammates, identifying me as the person who, you know, was a huge problem. So what was the huge problem? The problem was that during our competition, I accidentally said the word shit one time, and then they proceeded to humiliate me by saying, okay, you're ruining our school's image. Do you know you just destroyed our school reputation? You were so aggressive and belligerent and disrespectful during this competition. And they kicked me out of the remainder of the competition and also threatened to kick me off the team. Okay. And then the third time was also a mock trial related incident in my last year of college, where during a competition, one of my white team members pulled me aside to basically berate me, yell at me, and demean me in the middle of this competition so harshly that I started to cry for the remainder of that competition. And then when I brought it up to the rest of the exec board members, and keep in mind, the most prominent voices on that team were still white, so all of them basically had zero sympathy for me, and there were no consequences at all for this person's actions. And I think the reason this was disheartening to me was not because I thought they would actually ever do anything, because like they didn't give a fuck about me or my feelings, that they invalidated me at every turn, but it was mostly the fact that if the roles were reversed and if a person of color made a white person on the team cry like that, they would have been kicked off the team expeditiously. Hell, I was about to get kicked off the team because I said the word shit. Do you see how they're double standards, Nia? Anyway, so those are just some of the examples of, you know, people having issues with me over things that were complete non-issues, just so they would have an excuse to humiliate me in any way possible. And it is, in fact, a guise for misogyny. It is, in fact, a guise for racism. And this is why, still, I stand by the fact that woke white people are some of the most dangerous, insidious individuals that smart, opinionated women of color can face in today's society.
History reveals uncomfortable truths that challenge conventional narratives. The word slave originates from slav, because millions of white Europeans were enslaved. Over 1.5 million Europeans were captured by North African traders. That's something you probably didn't know. The Irish endured servitude in conditions sometimes worse than other groups in America. Approximately 2,600 black slave owners owned slaves, including Anthony Johnson, who was Virginia's first official slave owner and owned both black and white humans. The transatlantic slave trade involved various participants, not just one group. Radical Jewish merchants played significant roles, with figures like Aaron Lopez operating 15 slave ships in Brazil. Radical Jewish plantation owners owned thousands of slaves. Meanwhile, Islamic powers traded even more slaves. Estimates suggests hundreds of millions, primarily white Europeans, with some practices continuing even today. What you don't seem to understand is the Kalergi plan, proposed by Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi, a Jew, with funding from radical Jewish interests. He envisioned a mixed-race Europe disconnected from ancestral identities. Why? Because such a population would lack historical unity and resistance to control. This pattern repeats throughout history: infiltration, corruption, and elimination of those who might expose the truth. The white race they've desperately tried to destroy throughout history, and are still trying to destroy, is the only remaining obstacle to their new world order. Every chapter of history shows this pattern. They infiltrate, corrupt, and attempt to eliminate those who might expose them. So the white race that you so easily demonize is the last line of defense between you and total global enslavement. Your worth as a man comes from your choices, your courage, your commitment to truth. The white race stands as the final resistance against a plan that would enslave us all. Black, white, brown, yellow, everyone. When you demonize the only people who have successfully fought these forces throughout history, you're doing their work for them. This isn't about white or black. It's about freedom versus slavery for all humanity. The real heroes aren't defined by their race, but by the refusal to bow to injustice, their willingness to speak uncomfortable truths, and their dedication to a world where all people can thrive without masters.
So guys, welcome back. The reason why for the most part white people don't usually like it when black people speak up, when black Americans speak up. Number one, as I said in the introduction, it's because of cognitive dissonance, right? And number two, it's because they really do not like to be reminded what negative things they've done that has impacted negatively on the black community, right? They only want to be told the things they have done for the black community. And that is why with our opening video, we played that video of the man who was in a place that appeared to be a courtroom, right? And he was asked why he only speaks of the negative when it comes to the white government, and he does not address the positive things that the white government has done for the black people. And his response was that the government had done so little for the black people, and he was urging his community, the black people, to stop accepting the little that the government gives them and demand for what they truly deserve. So that is one very powerful message I heard from one of our speakers today.
Right. And as I earlier said, the thing about white culture is exactly, you can ask yourself, what exactly is white culture? And I wish the people from the white community, a lot of them could come out and answer this, because it would be interesting to look at it from their own perspective, right? You look at, for the longest time, they described what black culture was, right? Black culture was ratchet, black culture was gangster, black culture was ghetto for the longest time, right? But on the other hand, I would really like to get an answer from the white community, a lot of them who could come out to the internet and answer what exactly is white culture and expound on it, because it would be interesting to look at it from their own perspective, right? Because when you're talking about culture, you do not only embrace the things you say you brought to the world, because the there's a lot of things you brought to the world, and a lot of people still have long memories of a lot of them that were not so good. When you're talking about white culture, embrace also the part where you brought suffering to people, because as we said, there's a huge way in which history informs the present, and there's a huge way in which the present will also inform the future, right? Whatever we are doing right now in this present time, it's gonna affect how the future is gonna look for us, right? Today we are living in a world full of AI. Today we are living in a world where you can just, if you have a question, you just jump on Google and type it. But this process we didn't just wake up one day and got ourselves in a world where we have smartphones, where we have touch screens that you're touching and it's bringing results. It had to start with a phone like Nokia or Motorola, the button phones, right? For us to get to a point where we are at. Why am I saying this? Because when you're talking about white culture, it's good that they're embracing the good side of it. But what happens when they do not embrace also the negative side of white culture, right? Because you should be able to embrace every bit of your history, everything about your history that is making you the person you are. Because, for example, it's like saying right now, the only way you can be able to realize you have bad habits and change them is if you recognize and embrace the fact that you do actually have bad habits. Like, for example, if an alcoholic person recognizes that is a bad habit, that is the only time where the turning point is gonna come around for them to want to change that behavior. If you have a problem or you're struggling with substance abuse, the only way you're gonna clock it as a bad habit is when you embrace the fact that you indeed have a bad habit. Why am I saying that? Same as the white community. If you keep on denying that there's a negative side of white culture, then it means there's not gonna be a day where you're gonna sit yourself down and think, okay, this has to be changed because it's wrong, and that is the same thing you're passing down to the next generations that are to come. That is the same way you're raising your kids. Because picture this, why is racism so prevalent in 2026 when this is some of the things that black activists were talking about since the 1900s are still the same things that are happening. Louis Farrakhan has been giving speeches, Muhammad Ali has been giving speeches. Some of the things that Malcolm X was talking about back then are still happening in today's society. Why? Because there's some people who have refused to embrace all aspects of their culture in order to change the bad habits that does exist in their culture,
Right. Guys, there is a saying, barbarians at the gate, right? You have to wonder and ask yourself, how did this saying come about, right? After you've asked yourself that, now, for the longest time, I usually wonder how we got to a point where we were sold the idea of black people being savages, and how we came to believe that black people were savages, considering, just as one speaker said here today, there is just one particular race of people that went all over the world and were 60% responsible of the entire world's suffrage. And not only that, when you look at the two world wars that happened a long time ago in the 90s, it was also the very specific group of people who caused that very great harm to each other and to the world in general. And right now, there is also a person who has started a situation over in Middle East, and it is affecting the whole entire world in one way or another, and he's not enthusiastic about ending the situation whatsoever. And when you talk of World War II, countries like Vietnam, they're still feeling the effects up to today of how the American soldiers tampered with their water. And if you Google the effects of how them tampering with that water left Vietnam, it's still being felt up to today. And so to come from this group of people doing such kind of things all over the world, to them completely turn the table around and say that black people are the savages, it's completely beyond my imagination. And that is why I'm asking and wondering, how did we get to this point where black people started being referred to as the savages in this whole scenario?
Right, for wanting to free themselves, for wanting to run away from cruelty, for wanting to have a better life for themselves, themselves. They were labeled all sorts of names, and a narrative was driven out there that up to today we are still we are still fighting those we are still fighting those narratives to, you know, walk back those narratives that other communities have. They've been lied to, right? And then also you ask yourself, there's a speaker here who was talking about we shouldn't let the slave narrative, you shouldn't let them convince you with the slave narrative. And I beg,
he gave examples of how his own people, white people, were enslaved.
Right. And I beg to correct this speaker, because you cannot call slavery a narrative, because these were lived experiences that have been recorded, and some communities are still feeling the effects of it up to today. For them, it wasn't a narrative.
They
it
still
was
live
a
under
lived
that
experience. You understand what I'm saying? So stop reducing people's suffering and what people went through and categorizing it into a narrative. And you cannot compare whatever happened to white people to the 400 years of suffering that Black Americans had to endure, and then you're coming to bottle it down into a narrative, and you're trying to say, let's unite this and that. You should be instead talking to your own white community, white people. If you truly understood what you were talking about, talk to them about reducing the effect of what their ancestors have left behind. The system, demolishing the systems which up to date still targets the Black community, like for example, systemic racism, right? Because also you cannot, it's like the same way talking about the Jews and what they had to experience. You cannot call it the Jewish narrative. You understand what I'm saying? Because of the severity of what they had to go through, you know.
Right. And that particular white man, in his eyes, he might truly believe what he is saying, and he might truly understand it from a white point of view. And today is when I realized, listening to him, that white people are truly taught history from the white perspective, and they truly will never, this kind of people, they will never understand history from Black people's perspective or from a general perspective altogether.
Right. So guys, let us know what you think about the video we just played. You also consider subscribing if it's your first time here, and we'll catch you on our next episode. Thank you so much for always tuning in.